Since 1992, the Department of Education has been teaching Manx to the island's children. For just over a third of a century now, most children have been learning a bit of Manx at primary school, and some have been learning a lot more at secondary school. As part of Blein na Gaelgey, Year of the Manx Language, Perspective continues its series of talks with the movers and shakers of the Manx language, with Head of the Department of Education's Manx Language Service, Cathy Clucas. Cathy joins me now in the studio.
Currently, I'm not for very long. I've started recently as the lead for the Skimmy Gaelgey, which is the Manx Language Service.
Well, if we start off with the Skimmy Gaelgey then, what exactly is it that team does?
Well, what don't they do? Well, I'll start for... I think not everyone understands how much we do. Basically, we teach in Manx in all the schools on the island, except for the Bun School Gaelgey, and we don't deliver a service at King William's College either. So they're the only places we don't teach. Other than that, we teach from year 4 through to A-level. And we have a diverse range of learners. We have... some that have come from the Bun School Gaelgey that have learnt through immersion. So they have a few lessons delivered at the QE2 through Manx, but we also have lessons to teach sort of children that haven't gone through the Bun School Gaelgey, so they can further their knowledge of Manx from what a little bit they've learnt in primary school through to secondary school, so they can take a GCSE equivalent or an A-level equivalent. They can go that far if they wish to.
And of course, this is the longest running part of all the various Manx language services that we have now. Effectively, it was set up, I think it was in 1992. So it predates the Bun School Gaelgey by 8 years and Munjavega by 4 or 5 years too. So it's a really important service.
Yeah, it's all part of the process of how things have changed. So I'm trying to remember. I believe there was a question added. Was it the 1990? I can't remember which census it was.
Yeah,
there was a question.
It was a Gallup survey. Yeah,
was it a Gallup survey?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what it was. They asked the residents of the island at the time if there was Manx offered in schools, would you have your children learn Manx? And the overwhelming majority of people said yes. So obviously there were other things that were happening too, but from that there was a Manx language officer appointed. That was Dr. Brian Stowell. He was the first one, and they could only offer so much to begin with, but it was the start of it. It was, and it's incredible what's done.
It was a really important decade,
Yeah.
the 1990s, because of course you were one of the leaders, certainly of the development of Munjavega, which then went on to do all the lobbying to get the Bun School established. When you were starting off back then, what did you expect was going to happen from all this?
Don't know. Well, I'll do a bit of name dropping. I was talking to Miles Walker recently. Actually, it was at the Munjavega Art exhibition at the Air and Arts Centre, and he said, would you have imagined what's happening now 30 years ago? I said, not really. And then I said, but I wonder what will happen in the next 30 years. So, you have to keep thinking what could be the next things that could happen in the future.
Yes, and that's really important, isn't it? That we don't just sit back and assume that these things are all going to continue to happen and expand. People need to do a little bit of lobbying and a bit of work to make it all happen, don't they?
Yeah, I mean it's lots of little bits of there's so many people you couldn't name everyone and so many people they're behind the scenes doing things as well, so many unknown heroes, and also there were lots of people before that the Manx Language Service was started that did things as well. I mean, I was recently talking to somebody saying there was Beal Irish, which Peggy Carswell was running, and Brenda Bridson. And I remember Kate Pitts being there. And I don't know when they started, but I do remember going there with my eldest son, and that was at the Loch Promenade Church. So that was, there was all these other things that had been happening, and I think there were isolated cases of some Manx being taught in some of the schools, like depending on the teachers were teaching, depending on the teachers' interests. Some of them were teaching songs in Manx. There was some, like Colin Jerry, I know, did an awful lot to help children in the Peel, cloth workers. They did a lot of Manx there. And I think Leslie Quilliam would be another one. So there was teachers and people that had interest. It's all sort of contributing to moving forward where Manx is a bit more mainstream again.
And I suppose if you go back, in the 70s, because there was I don't know, there was Mech Vannon was a big thing then. It sort of really started to get electoral popularity. There was quite a bit of uncertainty or nervousness amongst the Manx population about the changes that were happening. And in the 70s, a lot of school teachers, Manx school teachers particularly, were really keen to teach Manx. I mean, I remember I was taught Manx at Arbury Primary School when I was there for 2 or 3 years anyway, maybe 3 or 4 years, and yeah, it was happening. But it's like I suppose the history of Manx education really during the 20th century was, you had phases, patches of Manx here, there, and in a few places. But in the 90s, when that after Brian Stoll was appointed, that was when things really started to take off, and it was formally part of the education system then.
Yeah, I mean, there's pathways, there's different learning pathways now, but there's still more that needs to be done. And I mean, an obvious gap is Key Stage 1 and Foundation in schools. There's not much, so that would be great to have things going on there. And well, I won't get political. I'll avoid talking about that. But obviously, it's difficult to make everything stretch, isn't it, and everything.
Yeah.
But also, like in the 1970s, there was rapid change happening, and I think now we're in another period where there's a lot of different rapid change happening, and I think you could apply it to anything really. I think everyone gets a bit nervous or a bit anxious when there's any type of rapid change happening, no matter what it is. So I think there is an element of that happening again on the island, but I think it's very important that whatever those changes are, that the culture and the language is part of it, and it's for everyone.
And of course, one of the things that's changing quite rapidly, well, it's probably changed the whole way in which society works, is social media and the internet. You know, when we started back in the 90s, these things were very much in their infancy. Even computers were only just starting to become a regular feature in people's homes, and now it's everywhere in terms of most people's lives. And in a way, that's a good thing for Manx, because one of the drawbacks we had was we didn't have enough people to warrant the production of books and film and resources. But electronic or social media, email, the like, means that you can produce resources for one or two people if you've got the time to do it. And it's not cost prohibitive. So actually social media and the internet are a real positive for Manx, aren't they?
Yeah, technology. Well, it's very important that we stay right at the cutting edge of technology, including AI and everything that goes with that, because that's what the future is for our young people. And so they need to be well equipped to use it. And why shouldn't Manx and our culture be part of that as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you mentioned earlier that what doesn't the Skimmy Gaelgey do? And one of the things that they're really good at, of course, is resource production, which has really taken off. And you're good at sharing that sort of stuff on social media.
Yeah, we'd love to do more. We're trying to do. We've got. It's getting enough hours in the day to be able to do so much that we can do. We're very lucky. We've got some amazingly talented staff on our team that can do all sorts of amazing things with tech, which really helps as well. But yes, we'd like to produce more that could be shared. So our plan is to eventually get more onto our website so that anyone can access that, and that could be used by anyone if they need to. Well, I mean, that's a place that we're not really delivering to, and it's an area where there's, for any children, young people that are homeschooled, so you'd hope there's access there for them as well, so it's inclusive as much as we can be.
And it is a Department of Education service, the Manx Peripatetic team, the Skimmy Gaelgey.
Yeah.
And I mean the scale of what you do, effectively, you're trying to teach from year 4 through to A level. Mm-hmm. I mean, for those like me who don't really understand what year 4 means, what sort of age group are we talking about?
There's 7-8-year-olds. Right. So it's Key Stage 2, the start of Key Stage 2, and then we go into year 5, which is sort of 9, 10, and then year 6, which is sort of 10, 11. Some of them aren't quite 11, and then they're into high school.
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
And you do this with a relatively small team.
Yeah. We've got, so we don't all work full time. So as an equivalent, there's only 6 full time members, but we've got 9, but some only work part time. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot.
Yes, and I imagine just writing the timetable out and working out who's going to be where and when and for how long, that in itself must be quite a challenge.
It is. Well, Paul Rogers, when he worked on the team, he used to do that, and he said, I love a challenge, and I quite like the challenge as well. So it's fitting it all in. We've got, basically, the way we have to do it is the high schools come first, because that's all part of a bigger timetable, and we have to fit in with them, and then we fit in primaries as much as we accommodate them, so it works for them as much as possible. So yeah, it's you could say, yes, it's quite a big, good satisfying challenge when it works.
Yeah.
So you get it to work.
and in terms of the high schools, because I know there have been times where some high schools haven't been so keen to support it. Is it in all the high schools now?
Yes, yeah. We're in all the high schools, and they've got their own demands on what they have to have happen to them as well. So it's tricky because there's so much going on in schools, and there's so many different demands, things that have to be fitted in. But in high schools with timetabled lessons, we do try and offer enrichment as well. But that's down to the individual staff members if they want to offer that.
And what does enrichment mean?
Well, like having a club. For one of the clubs in the past, they produced a video which went for the not Tina G, it was Film G, which was the Alba, which was a film, Scottish Gaelic Film Award. They put in an entry for that, and they did really, really well. And also one of our staff has put films in for that as well. I'm going on a tangent now. We produce some which are on our website, which are Shell and Ellen, which are films in Manx, which you can add subtitles to, about like, for instance, one was about making bread. So it was from growing the bread right through to it being made by Noah Bakehouse, and then go all the whole process. So they're on our website. So they were entered as well. But coming back to enrichment, so it's maybe they made a magazine, produced that as well, making games, sometimes just playing games, socialising. I've done with some of the older ones that is like reading things, it's like we read what did we read? We read that, I can't remember what it's called now. It was like a graphic novel, reading bits of it.
Right.
And then talking about what was in the text, and then saying, well, maybe suggesting maybe they could produce their own, or make, that sort of thing. Or just playing games. It's quite good fun as well. You go with it doesn't have to be anything too formal, but that's that's the type of thing we do play games in our lessons, but we don't always get time to do other things that we'd like to do. So it's quite nice.
And of course, games like Scrabble are really good games if you're trying to build your knowledge of a language, but you do have to have a specialised set of Scrabble letters, don't you?
Yes, I don't play Scrabble. That's one I've avoided. I've made crosswords and word searches and things like that, but that's technology again. You can do things like that. It's a lot easier than it used to be.
Yeah. Yes. In terms then of the numbers in this of children that you actually teach, roughly how many would you say you've got?
Well, it varies from term to term, depending on what school years was. But overall, roughly about 1,700, 1,800 thereabouts. Yeah.
And effectively, that's 1,700 people who wouldn't normally have known anything about the Manx language, or would have had probably very little exposure. Some schools, to be fair, some of the teachers do teach bits of Manx as part of normal sort of school, but on the whole, your service is the one place that people get.
Yeah, well, we're regular. We regularly are in the schools, and also we support them in other ways too. In the past, I've been asked to help. There was Foxdale School. They want to do a Melia as part of the Harvest Festival. So I was taught them some rhymes about that and how to do the dance a little bit. There was some of them that could do it, so because I wasn't there all the time, obviously. So just to get the basic principles of how to say tuon, all this sort of thing for the dance. And they did a little presentation, and some of it was in Manx as an assembly where parents came, and then they had a harvest sale afterwards. So there's lots of examples. We get asked to support children for the Manx Folk Awards. We listen to the men for the Guild, for the Manx classes in the Guild as well. So, yeah, we do that as well if we get asked to. And I think schools do what they can. Some schools have lots of signage and posters and this sort of thing. It varies. And sometimes it comes down to the interest of some of the teachers in the school, or it's something that the school has added to the part of their vision, so they're trying to incorporate more in. There is a new thing that's originally it was called, I don't know everything about it because that's other people know more because they're promoting it, it's the Manx Campus, and they've changed. It was called that to start off with, now it's called Gaelgey, and they've got a few pilot schools, and I think they've given them posters and signage and other things so they can get like an award. Yeah. For how committed they are, little things they can move into the school.
All about embedding Manx effectively into a school, so that the school, uses Manx to a far greater extent in the day-to-day operation of the school.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I know some teachers do it anyway. They like to do the register, Muramai, and they just say the name. Everyday thing. Faster my little things like that you can incorporate into the everyday running of the school, and some do maybe do a bit more. They might say "Jint to my, well done," or they might have some. Depending on how committed people are, some have stamps and stickers, and quite easy to get. And back down to technology again, it's like amazing, and you can do all these things quite easily, and they're not too much extra hassle to do, but they all help. Yeah.
If and it's probably the wrong time of the year for you to be answering this question, but if a parent was pondering whether they should ask for their child? Because, of course, this is an optional thing, isn't it, in most schools? Or is it?
Well, it's actually in the primaries, it's the vast majority of schools, everyone does it.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and there's not many that can't. And that might be down to, other reasons. So it's, so in some of the schools, that's quite big because some years have 3 classes in one year. So, we have to negotiate
quite a lot
or
of
have
working round, yeah.
2 people to go or have longer sessions or, to fit so everyone gets some Manx. And that varies with different schools. So some schools have half an hour a week, and they do 2 terms. Some schools, what works for them is they do 1 year does a whole term and they get an hour, or something like, rather than doing 2-year groups. And then you get some that do a half term for an hour and then another year does it. So it just depends on the school. You have to sort of negotiate with the school what works the best, what we can do and what works for them.
Yeah.
So, but the vast majority now are actually everyone does it.
And what do you think the children get out of this?
Well, what do they get out of it? Well, we try and make our lessons as fun as possible. So, and also it's very good if it's to show that languages are important. So we've got so many children that don't just speak one language; they can speak 2 languages already. And then they add another one, and that's fine. It's not a problem. But it's also shown that you value all cultures, all languages are all valued. So it's great. So you get some children. I remember this little boy hadn't been living on the island very long, and it came up that we're explaining there's 2 types of you in Manx. There's like oo and shoe. And his face lit up, and he was so delighted. He says, "That's the same in my language." And he was really, really happy about that, And he's going, "It's exactly the same." I was going, "Yes." And then another incident where it's a little boy from Bulgaria. He was born here, but his parents are Bulgarian, but he knows a bit of Bulgarian. And the word sniakta is actually almost the same as the Bulgarian for snow, which is sniakt. And we're going, wow, that's amazing, isn't it? And things like that. So there's like a joy, fun, and also build their confidence, and also hopefully they see things like around when they're moving around the island, like the places, they know the name of the places, what they mean. Like Doolish, pretty well everyone knows what Doolish is now. Which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite common. So I think they get a lot, feeling a sense of place and connection. I think it's important that everyone that lives on the island, especially all the children, some people are going to make their lives here, but not everyone does. Some people move on to other places. But whilst they're here and whilst they're growing up here, it's giving them a sense of belonging and a sense of place, and and hopefully they've got good associations with that, and what the Isle of Man is a good place, and you'd hope they have that memory and things they can say in Manx about the island, or even if it's a little bit, it's still something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these sorts of things are important, aren't they? Because I certainly remember when I was primary school was great because we had Manx lessons, and the headmaster was really keen on Manx history and geography and all the rest of it. Manx dancing at the Lake Column Killier, all these sorts of things. But when I went to secondary school, there was absolutely nothing about the Isle of Man. You learned about the history of every part of the world apart from the Isle of Man. You learned about the geography of every part of the world apart from the Isle of Man. It was quite a strange experience, really. And it is quite important that children who are educated in the Isle of Man know a little bit about the place, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember where we went to Castle Rush, and I think I remember in history we did a teeny amount on Vikings, but not really very much. That was about it, really. And I remember being aged about 15, and there was these books lying around the house, and I eventually got round to reading them. They were those there was the school book version of A.W. Moore's History of the Isle of Man. Remember the yellow and I think the yellow and red. The books,
Is it a fellow called Young? I'm sure it was.
But there was a Viking on the front, and I remember sitting and reading these and being absolutely amazed. Had no idea of all the history that was on the island, and actually I was a bit miffed, actually, to be honest, about it, because why aren't we learning any of this in school?
Because it's fascinating, the early, all the history of the Isle of Man, really. There's so much that's happened here. I was asked recently to give a talk about the Manx language, and I got into what language would have been spoken before the Vikings got here, or the Scandinavians, as we should probably better call them. And of course, we've got little glimpses of evidence. There's significant evidence that we were part of a Welsh kingdom, and maybe several Welsh kingdoms, and possibly Manannan MacLear, because he exists in both Welsh and Gaelic tradition. He could have been one of those early Q Celts, that's the Gaelic-speaking Celts, that had sort of moved away from the P Celts, which is the old Welsh speakers, and maybe Manannan MacLear was a kind of a bilingual Welsh, Manx Gaelic or Irish, old Irish speaker, and it's fascinating, I think, and knowing about all these links to our Celtic neighbours, I think it's quite fun.
It's really interesting because when you get into the legends surrounding the whole British Isles, really, a lot of them are very similar, and there's similar characters, and there's some very old stories, and then like in Ireland, you have the Book of Invasions, and there's all talking about different peoples coming in and this sort of thing. Some of them migration memories, they're very ancient, and they've been rehashed and put different. I think I don't know, maybe it's the similar where history is a bit determined by who writes it, and who's paying the money, and all. It's all a bit of PR propaganda, and I'm not sure sometimes. Like with legends and myths, and there might be a little bit of that going on, right? Who gets remembered and who doesn't, and this sort of thing. Because there's a little bit of imbalance about it all in some ways, because there's an awful lot about... I'm going on another tangent here, a warning.
We love tangents on this programme.
There's a lot about Manannan, but what about the female side of it? It's all a bit, so there must have been, just out of logic... there must have been both sides, but it seems to be more Manannan dominated. So I'm always curious about that. So,
and yet Manannan's wife features quite prominently in the story of Cuchulainn and the great cattle raid, the Cooley cattle raid, which I really... At some stage I want to read in Irish. I read it several times in English, but again, that's fascinating because many of the or some at least of the characters that are described in this ancient Irish text, which talks about history probably from around 500, maybe 400 AD, they refer to the likes of Manannan MacLear. They go to be educated in a place that could well have been, if you based on the limited evidence that's in this, the text, could well have been the Isle of Man. What was the Isle of Man like then? And of course, this is why learning Manx is quite fun, because you start to get your eyes open to all these interesting connections.
It's also all the similarities, in Scottish and Irish history and language, and also in Wales and Brittany and Cornwall, and even further afield. Like if you look at some of they're not they're prehistoric sites and things like that. There's a lot of similar patterns on the rocks, and this pre-stories, very ancient and. Like in Galicia, they've got same stuff is happening there, and it's really, I don't know what it all means.
No.
But it's really interesting.
Well, it is.
But yeah,
and it's great. You can kind of speculate about these sorts of things too, can't you? As to what was going on, because of course, one of the great sites in the Isle of Man, possibly underrated, is the Mule Circle, which is described by archaeologists as similar to many stone circles that were happening around 3000, I think it's 3500 BC, but with its own quite novel characteristics, which were innovative and different. And what was going on? First of all, how did all these communities from the very far-flung parts of the British Isles communicate with each other? How did they know to make their stone circles and ancient memorial sites similar? How did they know about that? And why did our one end up with significant innovations? And what we do know is that they knew a lot about geometry and they knew a lot about astronomy. It's fascinating, really. Yeah,
well, internet, of course. No, yeah, it is. It's very interesting. And the further you go into Europe, there's other similarities too. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of fun. And then when you get into origins of language, that Manx has got links to further back Indo-European languages and connected to Sanskrit as well. Which is in northern India. It's quite, there's a lot of words that are very similar in lots of different languages. Not like, I think it's Proto-Celt, I think. I'm not a linguist. I don't know all the technical words, so I'll just say that now. But yeah, it is very interesting.
And then, we sort of we got sidetracked. You did warn the listener that we were going to get sidetracked. But in terms then of when children get to secondary school, what's the value? Because sadly, these sorts of things are quite important. If someone is considering their education, they need to consider very carefully if they're going to do things like Manx, because there's a general perception, I think, for most people that maybe there's little real value in Manx other than that kind of personal, warm, fuzzy feeling about identity and things. But in terms of actually making a living, it's maybe not so important. But I don't know, how would you respond to that?
Well, there's any learning is. Any type of learning has got transferable skills for employment and for life and for other things. So the Manx language also offers those. We have a lot of transferable skills that you can use, apply, like problem solving, which is a good one. A bit of resilience. Learning about culture is good. So if you learn about your own culture or the culture of where you live, then you have a better awareness of other cultures and other languages. And just generally, as a human citizen of the world, as being a better citizen as well, having a better awareness. So there's those sort of basic things. But, we use technology. Also, it is a good thing to do in that I've heard from a few people, remarking that when you go into university and you're applying, sometimes that's the thing that can make a difference. The fact that you've done something slightly different, that you've Manx can just make you stand out that little bit from the crowd. So I have heard of people that have said they're pretty sure they got their place in a certain university because they knew Manx.
And that kind of differentiator is quite important in a world where everyone has the ability now. We live in a far more open society where most people have opportunity, certainly in the Isle of Man, you can be exceptionally well qualified to go to whichever university, but as a result of that, universities are having to look for quirky differences to be able to distinguish between applications.
Yeah. But there's lots of different learning pathways, and doesn't necessarily mean everyone will go to university, because people who have got apprenticeships, then their knowledge is equivalent to a PhD, in what they know. So it's not all academic, but it's also. I mean, if we're imagining the island in the future and how the government has signed up to the charter, part of that there will be more employability. There'll be opportunities for employment if they go through to the part 3 of the charter, won't they?
And so, that of course, just for the listener, the European Charter on Regional and Minority Languages, which isn't an EU thing, it's a European Council thing, which is separate. So anyone who's a bit anxious about anything to do with the EU, you don't need to worry. It's a separate a separate organisation. But yeah, that charter, the Isle of Man government has signed up to Part 3, which basically means it's going to continue to support the stuff that it supports at the moment. So that's pretty much what we've signed up to.
But it will mean there'll be more jobs for people that do have a knowledge of the Manx language, definitely, and within different roles. And also, one big thing that we do really need for the future is more teachers, not just teachers, people that are senior education support workers, carers, secretaries, caretakers, everything really. The more there is, that.
That's one of the great things about the fact that this started back in the early 90s, is we are now getting people. Well, we're probably past getting people who've been through the whole system. Some will have GCSEs, some will have A levels in Manx. Others will just have a basic knowledge of Manx that they've learned from the peripatetic team, but they are now in the workforce and using their Manx, hopefully.
Yeah. And have opportunities to use it. And also, I mean, it doesn't have to be for a job. It's just for their own, socialising and different, and and also creativity. There's a lot of. It's wonderful to see. There's a lot more people. There's a lot of artwork that incorporates Manx into it, and music, and and all sorts of different genres of music as well, which is really good to see. Yeah.
Yes, it is, and actually that possibly neatly allows us to move into. Well, actually, you've got two posters in front of you. So before we move off the skimmy Gaelgey, let's hear about that first.
Right. So because it's been 35 years that the skimmy was first started, and it's the year of the Manx language as well. What we usually do, the Coosh usually happens in October, and one of the things we do is we. The year sixes, they're the ones in the last year of primary, they write a postcard in Manx and they send it to other year sixes and other schools. And we're supported by the Isle of Man Post Office to do this. But this year, for the year of the Manx language, the Coosh is going to be in the end of September. And we were thinking about what could we do to make it a bit more special, because it's a special year for us, for the team, and also for the year of the Manx language. So what we're doing is a competition for postcard designs, and whoever wins the design, so we're doing it for different age groups in Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 and 5, so that's like from year 4. Then they can design a postcard, send it in, and they can give it to the Manx teacher, or they can post it in or email it in, however, doesn't really matter. And if you win, say your postcard design won, your postcard design will get printed professionally, and then we'll use those for the Coosh Vua in September. And so we'll have the one used for the Key Stage 2, that'll get used for the primary, and whoever's in, we'll do it with all the key stages this year. And I'm hoping to, with the Key Stage 5, is to get them to write postcards to people such as the Taoiseach or people in the Scottish Assembly, and maybe some Manx celebrities that are on the island and off the island, and hopefully they'll reply in Manx. So this is another thing we'd like to do. So that's in September. So this is the competition. It's on our website, which is just Manx Language Service, but there are posters around and on social media, and you just scan the QR code and that gives you all the information. Your children don't have to do it through school. They can do it at home. It doesn't. Or if you're not in school, if somebody's educated at home, they can do it that way. It doesn't matter. And the only extra thing I want to say is for Key Stage 4 and 5, there's an extra competition for a stamp design. And whoever that will get used as a prepaid stamp on all the postcards. Now, the big thing is all the designs must have is some Manx words incorporated into their design. And the theme is Manx themes. Manx myths and legends. And we're quite looking for, you can put a bit of a modern twist onto it. It doesn't have to be very traditional. You can see what you can come up with. Okay.
Well, that sounds fascinating. And to do all of this, is there a website or something that if they don't catch up with this through the schools and your team?
Yeah. If you just probably Google Manx Language Service, you could say competition, or it is on our we've got a Facebook page, Manx Language Service, so you probably find it that way if you look at our posts. And like I say, there's a QR code. And it has been sent to all the schools, and I have actually emailed libraries as well to put the poster up, so it's just as many places as possible.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's very good, and let's hope that you'll come back at some point and tell us some of the replies that have come back in, because it would be, well, I know that there are people, politicians certainly in Ireland and Scotland and Wales, who know a lot about the Isle of Man and are very supportive about what we're doing with the language. And of course, another part of the work that the Manx Language Officer for the Department of Education does is attending British Irish Council's conferences and talking about the great successes we've been having with promoting and developing the Manx language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so that's Rob Tier. He's still the Manx Language Officer, so it's sort of split the role, and then what I do is just lead the Manx Language Service. Yeah.
But through the work of several Manx Language Officers over the years, that word has been spread, and depending on how some of the elections go, because of course there's some elections. I know there's some to the Scottish Parliament, maybe to the Welsh Assembly as well. I think there is to the Welsh Assembly. So depending on how they turn out, we may have people re-elected that know the island very well.
Well, and on the island, we're coming up for an election this year.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good question to ask your MHK, your prospective MHK, is their attitude towards the Manx language. Might be worth finding that out.
And most politicians now really do seem to get it. I mean, I've been very fortunate. Daphne Kane has asked me to go along and do some Manx lessons for some of the Tynwald members, and at one stage we had almost half of the Tynwald members had turned up, and a lot of them now are using a little bit of Manx in the parliamentary setting, which some people might say, well, what are they wasting their time doing that? They should be speaking English. Some Manx speakers might well be saying, well, it's just tokenism because they're not really doing very much. But on the whole, I think it's a great thing that they are using Manx in the parliamentary setting, and fantastic to hear.
It is, yeah. I suppose it was Peter Carron was really started it.
He was the pioneer.
Of it, yeah.
No, he did a great service, and I think he's often. Possibly because of his outspoken nature in politics, he's often undervalued for the tremendous work that he did in promoting Manx. And who can forget the waterboard vans with Ushtia written in big letters along the side? And as a result, I think most people know what Ushtia means.
A lot of people say Ushti.
Yeah, well, they do.
But Ushta,
But at least,
But then I always say, if you write the word Killia down, I said, that's Killia, don't you?
Yeah.
And then I said, well, Ushta, same sort of similar sound at the end,
Well, as outgoing clerk to Russian, I have had the what would you say, the misfortune to hear many people mispronouncing Ballakillia. And I suppose it's an understandable thing if you are new to a place, but if I went to England and started talking about the River Thames, I think people would soon start saying, it's not the Thames, it's the Thames. But how would I know?
How would I? Well, that's it.
Yeah.
People don't know if they don't hear it, and they assume. So it's a bit. I don't know. It's a bit like having a class or having a way that people know how these things are said. I mean, some people say have things written phonetically, like they have an A on the end, don't they, rather than an EY, to stop that confusion. But yeah.
Yes, it's of all the general design of the Manx spelling system isn't so bad once you get used to it, but the EY at the end of the word of a word is the one bit that really does throw most English speakers who've never come across Manx before. But it's never an E sound. It's always an or a Y sound.
Like Kersha, Banya, Killia.
Yeah, and of course, Banya, the great...
it's on the pot,
Isle of Man creameries have Banya on all their cartons, which is a tremendous thing.
Be nice to see some Kersha as well.
Well, yes, maybe it'll come. Maybe it will.
It would be great. And Eam, bit of Eam as well, be good.
So then, in terms of the progress that you're making, what are the hopes for the future from the Skimmy Gaelgey, the Manx language service?
Well, if I wanted to do what I'd like to do, but we probably wouldn't be allowed. Well, it's not. I wouldn't be allowed. It's just it comes down to bigger things like
there's
the economy,
finance,
money, all this stuff, finance. But if that wasn't an issue, I'd have more teachers. Teacher training for people on the island that could become a teacher and do Manx. Have Manx Key Stage 1 and in Foundation. And then hopefully from also, but that's not a part of our remit. It would be good to have obviously more preschool because that's really important as well for children. But it's good because there's gaps, you see. So you might go to Munjavega and do a lot of Manx, but you couldn't go to the Bun School Gilgach for various reasons. Not every, probably a lot more people would like to go but couldn't.
Yeah.
For it's logistics,
it's the geographical.
It's life,
thing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So then there's a gap, isn't there? And then you don't get anything else till you get to, depending on your family circumstances and what you do. Maybe you do Manx dancing, and so maybe you've got exposure to Manx that way, or other ways. But often there isn't much, and there's like a bit of a desert, really. So ideally, it would be good if there was, not a desert, where people have the choice to dip in, dip out, but it's there all the way through your life from 0 to whenever, forever. It's lifelong learning. So, but at the moment, it is still a bit disjointed. There's still a few gaps, and even in further education on the island, there isn't a lot of opportunities there either, which it would be good. I wonder, as there's more bilingual young people, there's not a lot for them really for their futures and to use the skills that their skill set they've got. So that some have gone off to other places and are quite famous musicians now and all sorts. But for the others, I feel there should be more something available for them. That's my personal opinion. I feel that's the way we should be going, where there's a pathway for people, different pathways, but where you've got the chance to all the way through your education be able to, if you can speak Manx or are brought up in a household with Manx, where you can use it as much as English, but you could be able to use it.
Yes, and of course, one of the areas which Irish, Welsh, Scottish Gaelic are used quite significantly is in relation to the tourist trade.
Oh yes. Well, interestingly, There's the Isle of Man Business Forum on Thursday, Inter-Celtic Business Forum, isn't there? And the speakers that are talking just about that, about the Gaeltacht, and how the language is a very important attraction for tourists. And I think that's something that's underutilised yet on the island that could be further developed in the future as well.
That was the head of the Department of Education's Manx Language Service, Cathy Clucas. So what do you think? Is it a good thing to teach our children a language that, alongside English, is an official language in the Isle of Man? Of course, our children need to know about and understand the rest of the world, but surely it can't do any harm to learn a bit about the culture and heritage of our island home. Perhaps you have a less supportive view about the Manx language. Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gaughan at manxradio.com and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast. I'm Phil Gaughan, go to Myers and Gaelgey. Thanks for listening.